We all have seen the show Hoarders, and we all can agree that hoarding is a mental illness. It's a compulsive disorder. And I see billionairism as hoarding at an extreme. So typically, a hoarder affects themselves and their families, and it doesn't really spill out into society. But billionaires hoard at such a level that it affects every one of us and it affects the planet.
Before we jump in today, I want to name something up front. This is a complicated topic for me because the conversation around billionaires tends to split into two extremes. Either they're evil or leave them alone, they earned it. And honestly, I can see parts of both arguments. I can see how people get furious when they're struggling to pay rent, afford groceries, or feel like they're doing everything right and still falling behind, all while other people have wealth that's almost impossible to comprehend. But I also want to say this carefully. Dehumanizing billionaires doesn't fix anything. It might feel satisfying for a minute, but it doesn't move us toward a healthier system or a healthier relationship with money. And here's the piece I keep coming back to, one that's uncomfortable, but it's important. That same scarcity mindset can live at both ends of the spectrum. It can show up in someone with extreme wealth and in someone who feels trapped in financial despair. Because when you strip it down, both can be organizing their lives around money and fear. Fear of losing it, fear of not having enough, fear of what happens if it all falls apart. And in that way, they can actually be more alike than they seem on the surface, even though their circumstances are wildly different. That's why I wanted to explore this topic with today's guest, Diana Colleen, because she comes at it from a different angle that doesn't just land on blame. Diana is the author of They Could Be Saviors, a near-future speculative novel that asks one provocative question. What if the only way to save the planet is to kidnap the billionaires, destroying it? Her work weaves in together themes like climate change, inequality, and what she calls the soul sickness of unfettered wealth. In this episode, we talk about why she frames extreme wealth through the lens of hoarding, the difference between calling something evil versus calling it immoral, how culture rewards accumulation, and what it might look like to reward something else, and why changing systems without changing consciousness may not be enough. And I'll be honest, our conversation only scratched the surface of this topic. This is one of those conversations that shouldn't end when the episode ends. So as you listen, I want to invite you into a different posture. Not certainty, not outrage, but curiosity. Where do you agree? Where do you resist? What feels true and what feels uncomfortable? I'm your host, Ryan Olekson, and this is Beyond 80%. Diana, welcome to Beyond 80%. I'm so excited to have this conversation today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited as well.
Before we jump into everything today, I want to give listeners a little bit more information about your book and ground them in your work. So can you tell us what They Could Be Saviors is about and what the core question your work is trying to wrestle with?
They Could Be Saviors is a near-future speculative fiction that asks, what if the only way to save the planet is to kidnap the billionaires, destroying it? So it looks at billionairism as a mental illness rather than success. But kind of underneath it all is a story of transformation, how facing trauma can lead to healing on a collective scale.
It's a great book. And I want to ask you, why this book, why this story, and why now?
I didn't really have a choice. It's never been on my radar to write a book. And I guess, without knowing my backstory, I learned meditation after a suicidal period in my life. So one of the tools that brought me out of that was meditation. So I meditate every night. And a few years ago, while I was meditating, the universe just planted this idea in my head about this story. And I ignored it at first, but it kept coming back in meditation. It was like knocking at the door saying, let me in. And I was in a job that I really disliked at the time. So my partner said, I can support you. If you want to quit your job and write this book, I will support you. And that was That took a huge leap of faith for me for many different reasons, but I did. So I quit my job about 3 years ago to write full time, and the concept of the book was fully formed in meditation. But as I was writing it, when I would get writer's block, I would meditate, and the what happens next came to me. So when I first started writing, I did not know how the book was going to end. I didn't know what the characters were going to do, what their backstory was. So every bit of this came to me in meditations. I believe it was a gift for me, and it just needed to be written.
That is so incredible. And what a leap of faith you took that you get this idea through meditation and you're like, I have to get it out. It has to be born into the world.
Yeah, that's how I felt. It's really strange. People ask me like, "Oh, you must be so proud like when you first got the first copy in your hands." But it, like I don't feel like it's a me thing. Like, yeah, I wrote it and I put a ton of effort and blood, sweat, and tears went into it. But I don't know. I don't feel like it's mine, if that makes
Mhm.
sense. I don't really know how to describe it to people.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
almost like it's your service for other people.
Yes, it's the message that's important.
So you've before described this work as coming from moral urgency. So what
Mhm.
was a moment or observation that you had that made wealth and power personal for you?
I wouldn't say that it was a moment. It was my upbringing. So I was born into a poor family. We we struggled a lot when I was a kid, actually eating food out of dumpsters. From a very young age, I could see the difference between people who had and people who didn't. And so growing up, I would see other people having opportunities, even though they weren't as smart as I was, but their families could afford for them to do things. And so they were able to get scholarships and stuff like that because they were involved in extracurricular activities. They were involved in the community. Whereas I started working when I was 11 years old to help my mom with expenses and to buy my own clothes. So I didn't have time or the money to do those extracurricular activities. So scholarships were actually really hard for me to get, even though I was extremely smart. So I've always known that talent and effort doesn't necessarily mean access.
So having that background, did you form an early message about what money meant and how it was represented in your world?
Don't think I really saw it as money. I saw it as fairness. And so my mom always said, Diana, life isn't fair. And my comeback to that was, but if it can be, why isn't it? And I've lived with that in my heart my entire life. If something can be fair, it should be fair. And I believe as a society, we have a long way to go as far as fairness is concerned.
I want to jump into some of the characters in your book, just as we're having this conversation. It feels like it's the right time to ask you. So you have multiple different characters. They have different storylines. Do these characters represent something about our society in terms of fairness? Or do they represent different elements of society and just life in general?
I definitely wanted to make the distinction between feminine energy and masculine energy. So the feminine energy is very empathetic, caring, kind, compassionate, and the male energy is very dominant and competitive. So that's the main distinction in the characters, and the women are they are the ones who are actually changing the world by by kidnapping these billionaires and putting them through psychedelic therapy. They don't want any of the the accolades. So solving climate change is, a key element in the book. The billionaires are going to solve climate change, but it's the women who are facilitating that, and the women don't want to be the saviors. They just want to go out and live their lives after they save the world, whereas the men are like, we did it. We're the saviors.
Taking credit there. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So your writing uses big imagery, and to make this point come alive, I want to talk about one piece that I see as the strongest. You use the image of the dragon hoarding treasure while the
Mhm.
world burns. What does this metaphor reveal about the psychology of extreme wealth?
So I use the dragon metaphor kind of it's it's the intersection of Western and Eastern myth. So in Western mythology, the dragons are evil. They hoard wealth, they steal the people's treasure and won't give it back even though they what is a dragon going to do with a pile of gold? And the heroes have to go and steal the stuff back from the dragons. In Eastern mythology, dragons are seen as wise and they don't take prosperity, they bring prosperity and they actually protect communities. So this book looks at billionaires as both types of dragons. So they start out as the Western image of a dragon and they turn into the Eastern image.
They transform.
They transform. Yes.
Oh, I love that.
I'm not saying that they're monsters. I'm saying that they actually get to choose how they're perceived. By the choices that they make, they can be perceived as evil or they can be perceived as good.
I know the book is fiction, but I feel like it's super relevant to everything kind of going on right now in our world, in the media. It's a conversation that's happening actively. And I want to dive into some of these ideas around the book in a real world type of scenario. You've said before that becoming a billionaire can be a kind of psychological illness, it's a disconnection from empathy and having enough. Can you talk us through that idea a little bit more?
We all have seen the show Hoarders, and we all can agree that hoarding is a mental illness. It's a compulsive disorder. And I see billionairism as hoarding at an extreme. So typically a hoarder affects themselves and their families and it doesn't really spill out into society. But billionaires hoard at such a level that it affects every one of us and it affects the planet. So I don't mean to say that, like, it's an illness, it's not an insult, I think it actually humanizes them.
I love this aspect of it because I think in our society in general, we have addictions that are rewarded,
Mm,
overworking, consumerism.
yes.
And I can definitely get on board with this idea that this is a different version of hoarding. I think that's a
Mhm.
really interesting comparison.
It's like with interventions, right? Um, this book is an intervention. They need help. I see them as human beings who have had their own trauma. Every human has gone through some kind of trauma in their life. We all have things that happen to us that make us who we are, and some of those things develop into mental illnesses, and that is not something to be ashamed of. It means that you are human and you need help, and I believe that billionaires need help.
Do you think that there's a difference between billionaires who have been born into it and billionaires who are self made?
In a way, um, the ones who have been born into it kind of don't know any better. I- But if you're self-made, I don't understand how you can disconnect from your past to be to not care about the people who you used to be like.
So almost saying that when you have this type of money, you become in like this different category, different hierarchy. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, like you don't see yourself as the person that you used to be. Like, yes, you have overcome obstacles, and I think that's fantastic. But to deny your past, to deny who you used to be, and you used the systems that, to get you there. And to be a billionaire, I don't know how you can be a billionaire without exploiting somebody, you know? So, if you exploited people who were like you back when you started, I don't know how you can live with yourself.
So tell us more about that. Where do you think that the exploitation would happen?
I mean, workers' wages. We have minimum wages, right? But we don't have maximum wages. If somebody wants to have billions of dollars, okay, but you can only have that if you're paying your lowest paid worker a living wage. You know? Um, I think that a maximum wage based on the lowest paid worker. So you're only allowed to make X times what your lowest paid worker makes. That way, if you want to make more money, you just have to pay your people more so that you can make more. I think that would be fair to everyone.
So making that salary equal what you are paying yourself, you are also raising for your workers who are working for that business.
Yeah.
If we did look at billionairism as a mental illness, I'm just curious, what would be the remedy, do you think? What kind of psychological roots would someone get to? What do you think the plant medicine would get to for someone like that?
Psychedelic assisted therapy has been proven to help things like PTSD, depression, but also addiction. So it has so many benefits for addiction. And I see billionairism as an addiction to power and money.
So it would be treated more like the addiction side of counseling, let's say.
Yeah, and also heart opening. So MDMA is considered to be a heart-opening substance. And for me personally, that's the drug that saved my life. It's really good for working on relationship things and like connection to other human beings. So for me, since being exposed to that type of medicine, you realize that love. It sounds so cliche. That love really is all there is, and loving your fellow human beings, it just comes kind of naturally after you've experienced this. You see you see every human being on the planet differently once you've experienced this heart opening experience. And billionaires, I just feel like they are isolated and disconnected from the rest of us as like humanity. They're not in touch with how we actually live and survive. And I think that that would be really good for them to experience.
The thing about the love being that is the only thing. I mean, we just finished a series about near death experiences and those who have crossed and come back. And one of the main themes that they always come back with is that love is the baseline, love is the frequency, it's all there
Mhm.
is. And it's almost like the
Yeah.
formula of being on earth. And I've always thought that really stuck out to me because I've had my own experiences with plant medicine, and that was my always biggest takeaway is that love is all that matters.
Yeah.
Everything else is almost a symptom of going against love.
Can you imagine a world where everyone experienced that? Like that is my goal, is for everyone to experience that in one way or the other. It doesn't have to be through plant medicine. I mean, meditation does that for me.
So one thing you said that was interesting about billionaires being separated and isolated, I can definitely see where that can come in because I'm sure the trust gets a little bit uh, dismantled when you have that much money and questioning people's motives and
Mhm.
why they want to be around you. But do you think it's possible? And do you think that there's billionaires who, do live amongst normal people and do have very similar experiences without being in that larger than life type of mindset?
I mean, there are quiet billionaires. I think there's just over 3,000 billionaires in the world, and we don't know all of their names. I'm sure we could find them. But yeah, there are quiet billionaires who don't want to be, you know, in the news and media, and who probably are living somewhat, I guess, more normal lives, just with more stuff. But I don't think that when you have that much money that you can relate to normal people. You don't shop for your own groceries, you don't cook your own food, you don't interact with with people just on the street. So I don't know that a billionaire can have a normal life.
Yeah, and I want to kind of draw this like definition of, billionaires in terms of that mental illness, right? Like are we talking about the people like Bezos and Musk who are out there in the media and they're getting a lot of coverage, or are we talking about billionaires across the board?
I don't think people really understand how much a billion is. So 1 million seconds is 11 days. 1 billion seconds is 32 years.
Wow.
Isn't that insane?
Yeah.
So if you have $1 billion, like, why would anyone need that much? And we have to, as a society, we have to ask ourselves what's enough. Do you have a definition of what you think enough is?
Yeah, I do think I do. I would
Okay.
say what's enough, that I would say not feeling trapped by money, but I also know that that's a mindset. Being able to make sure I have my basic needs, necessities for me and my family, um, and not stressing about money in terms of, if I want to do something that I can do it. I don't have to stress about doing it. But again, as I'm saying this out loud, I'm like, that's my definition. That's my mindset. Right. And I
Yeah.
think that's a choice as well.
For me, when I think about billionaires and enough, my definition is it's not a number, it's a relationship. So it's the point where having more stops adding to your well-being and starts subtracting from somebody else's. And the rules were written by people like you, by billionaires. So the rules are written to in your advantage. And those rules exploit other people. So even though you played by the rules, you still exploited other people to get to where you are. And I don't think that's okay. So I'm not saying that um, billionaires got there by breaking rules and stuff like that, but it's the system that allows them to do that. And we need to change the system.
I think we're all victims of the system in some way, shape, or form. And I would also argue that billionaires feel that way too, especially when they have to pay their taxes. But at some level, if the system is what it is, and there are a lot of us who work in these corporations or own our own businesses, to some level, we are using that system. We are part of that system. So, how are we not, in a way, exploiting the same way that a billionaire would, just on a much smaller scale?
It's conditioning too, right? So we are conditioned to see monetary wealth as success. That's what we're striving towards. And I think it goes back to what we were saying before. We see having money as safety, right? So I think that our aspiration is actually fear disguised as aspiration. We want to feel safe, and that's a totally normal human need. That's why we project ourselves onto billionaires as a society. We need to shift from the scarcity mentality. Society has had a scarcity mentality for a very long time. I don't know if you've read the book Ishmael by Daniel Quinn. It's an amazing book. Daniel Quinn is the author who has influenced my writing the most. But he talks about how when we went from hunter-gatherer to a more agrarian society, when we actually were able to start producing enough food without, you know, wondering when we're going to eat again, we had the ability to start locking up food. And that's when hierarchies started existing and somebody was in control of the supply. So, as a society, when we were actually having the most abundance, is when we started having a scarcity mentality. And that lives on today. And billionaires are an extension of that. There's enough on this planet for everyone. Even like 8 billion of us can survive and thrive with what the planet provides. But because we have a scarcity mentality and we allow our systems to have these individuals who hoard way more than they could ever spend in 100 lifetimes, we think there's not enough. And that's what we need to change.
That's a really interesting point. Coming back to the scarcity mindset, that in some ways billionaires are focused on money. And then you have people that are living in poverty, they're also very focused on money. But when I look across that spectrum, I see them as very much like the same types of people, right? They're focused on money, they don't have enough. And
Mhm.
when I think about it that way, they're more alike than they are different. And it brings me to this thought again of mindset and
Yeah.
conditioning. And is it really a billionaire problem, or is it a conscious community problem where, you know, we are so conditioned as people and we're all consenting to this idea of
Yeah.
scarcity all the time, right?
It is our consent. We we are agreeing with the story, right? Billionaires are a reflection of what we reward as a culture. We celebrate competition, we celebrate domination, we celebrate accumulation. And I want to shift that to celebrating empathy, celebrating contribution, celebrating cooperation. And if we can shift that, then our systems will follow. That's kind of the difference between reform and revolution, in my opinion.
Mhm.
So, um, revolution, I think people think of revolution as like something violent, but you can have a revolution of consciousness that is nonviolent. It's just a matter of shifting people's beliefs and the stories we tell ourselves about ourselves and about society. So that's the revolution I'm looking for.
What a revolution that would be, too.
Right?
You know, and sticking with this thought, I I really love it. And when I look at the media, or I turn on a podcast or what have you, I find that billionaires are being made out to be evil quite a bit. And when I
Mhm.
think about it again, with the ideas that these are people, they have human problems just like the rest of us. Yes, they have a lot of money. They have human
Mhm.
problems just like the rest of us. And, just our discussion now about consciousness overall, mindset, and looking at the system. Do you think that framing billionaires in this evil, the villain of the
Mhm.
country type of role is justified, or does it go against the whole idea of this revolution of empathy?
So I think there's a distinction to be made between evil and immoral. I think evil is it kind of gives the connotation of inhuman and unchangeable, whereas immoral is very human, and morals, you can actually learn morality, and you can make choices to change your immoral behaviors. So I think looking at it as immoral humanizes it rather than evil. But
Got it.
I also, I think there are two camps. There's the people who look at them as evil or immoral, and then there's the people who look at them as heroes and success. And I want people to look at billionaires as human beings and understand that they are the way they are because of their upbringing, things that happened to them, just like I am the way I am because of things that happened to me and my response to those things. The billionaires are exactly the same. They made choices based on what happened to them, and so yeah, they are human beings, and yeah, I want to look at them as people who have a mental illness who need help.
So by framing them as having a mental illness, that almost in a way humanizes them instead of makes them like these untouchable giants who live amongst us.
Yes, yeah,
Got it.
definitely.
How would you, if you could, reframe how we teach our kids or how we think about what success and achievement is?
In a perfect world, what is success? I think it comes back to about having enough and defining what enough is. There's a point where having more money doesn't create more safety. And there's been plenty of studies that show that having at a certain point, having more money doesn't create more happiness either. So looking at what else besides money brings joy and happiness. And so having a connection to nature, I think, should be part of success because having a connection to nature brings so much joy to my life, at least, and beauty and awe. And I think that's what is really lacking in society is awe, awe, joy. Um, and joy is different than happiness. I think happiness is kind of like a fleeting thing, like, oh, I got a new car. I'm happy for how long until the car doesn't smell nice anymore. you know? But joy, I think joy is a state of being. And if you are a joyful person, I think that's success. To
Mm.
be able to be out in the world, even when there's horrible things happening in the world all around you, to still be joyful, to still be grateful, to be alive, to be grateful for everything that you have, that's success. And I think that we need to instill that into our children.
What a world that would be.
Right?
So, coming back to this idea of enough, I'm kind of dancing back to the systems and the reform of that. If we were to set floors of survival, let's say,
Hmm.
should we
Hmm.
also set ceilings for accumulation?
Definitely. I 100% believe that. That goes back to the maximum wage. If you want more, you pay other people more. You make other people's lives better so that you can have more. But I think hopefully over time, if we instill those things in our children, the joy and compassion and empathy, we're not going to want to be a billionaire. And if we do, it's to help other people. Somebody said, what would you do with $1 billion? And I think most normal people want to help other people. Like that's top of their list of what they would do with $1 billion. Oh my gosh, I would help so many people. That's what I want for society.
There is a lot of billionaires who do give back to society. They donate, they provide programs and services. Is it your thought that they're not providing enough? Like what are your thought about the ones who do make those significant contributions?
Well, first of all, a billionaire's ability to give back stems from the fact that they've already taken too much, right? So that's the first thing. And then as far as the philanthropy itself, yes, I believe that some of them want to do good things and they are doing good things. However, the system is such that when they donate, they get tax breaks. So those tax breaks actually fall on us. We're paying more because they're getting the tax breaks, and their wealth can actually increase by them giving stuff away,
Mm.
which is just it's wrong. It's so wrong. And they also like they have their own foundations, so they donate to their own foundation so that wealth is still in their control and they're getting even more tax breaks because of their so they're getting personal tax breaks, the foundation's getting tax breaks, and it's governance without being elected, so they get to decide what gets fixed instead of humanity deciding what gets fixed.
I'm glad you walked us through to how those tax breaks work, creating the foundations to get the tax breaks so that they can keep more of their wealth. You brought up something interesting too about they get to decide what gets fixed. They get to decide what gets the attention and money. And when I think about having humanity decide, I can't even I can't even imagine how that would work. Kind of throwing it back at you, like if humanity were to decide what got fixed, how would that look in this utopian world that we're talking about right now?
Well, it's about, fair systems. It's about equity, not necessarily equality. I think we all know the difference between equal and equitable. But yeah, having an equitable society. I think I think most humans want that. I don't think billionaires want that because they would have to give up their power, their control.
I was reading last night that if the 3,000 billionaires donated 1 to 2% of their overall wealth, it would, I believe it said it would cover, it would wipe out all poverty for up to 6 years.
Right?
And it would give a runway to climate change necessities to kind of set us up for the future for maybe 5 to 10 years. And it sounds nice, but then I was thinking long term, how would that look?
Yeah, so I think a lot of people think redistribution of wealth, right? Like, well, if we redistribute the wealth, eventually we're just going to end up in the same place we're at. It like you look at people who win the lottery. So if you come from a scarcity mentality, if you live from a place of lack and you get something, you're you don't know how to live like that, and you will end up broke again, even though you've won all this money. And so I think that if we redistributed the wealth, I think that is what would happen. We would eventually end up back where we're at because so many people live with the scarcity mentality. So I think the number one thing is we have to heal that as a society. We have to heal the scarcity mentality so that billionaireism is just eradicated. Nobody wants that for themselves anymore.
I'm looking at this conversation as like a tangled box of like power cords. And like, where do we even start? Do we start with the system? Do we start with billionaires giving away money? Do we start with changing the mindset of the community? I mean, in your eyes, who's the chicken and who's the egg in this conversation?
I think everyone wants like overnight change, right? It's not going to happen overnight. It's impossible. What we believe, the stories that we tell, the myths that we tell about human beings, it's about changing those stories, and it's not going to be an overnight thing. But like my book is my attempt at having people like think about things differently. And I think that the more we teach our children this, the more people who teach their children, those children are going to grow up and be politicians. Hopefully, like we're going to have better politicians who care about different things. And I think that I think that communism and socialism have been very misunderstood, but so has capitalism. So I think people think, well, capitalism's better than communism and socialism. Is it? All three of them are terrible. They're all terrible. People die in all of those systems. People starve in all of those systems. I think we need to start thinking about what is best for humanity, and maybe coming up with a completely different system, especially with the way that technology is going. We have the technology already in existence that would allow human beings to thrive. So let the technology do the stuff that we don't want to do, and let humans be creative, because that's what makes us human, is the creativity. I see it as we're at this junction, and we can either go the Terminator route or we can go the Star Trek route. And I choose Star Trek. Their society, people are thriving. You don't have to go to a job you hate. You can do whatever you're good at, whatever you want, whatever your passion is, whatever your purpose is. But we, as a society, we're like, well, you have to work at this shitty job so that you can ba- barely pay your rent and barely eat food. You have to pay to exist. I just don't think that's what humans are put on this earth for.
That is such a good point. And I promise I won't go into the AI conversation, but I do have to make a comment about this because I I think we're being set up from the media to think that AI is the scary looming thing that's around the corner. It's going to take your job and you're going to be poor
Yeah.
and all that, right?
Yeah. Yep.
But the way that you're looking at it, I think is so important. In my counseling sessions, the one thing I hear over and over from some of my clients is that they have these passions. I watch them light up
Yeah.
from
Yeah.
head to toe, and that is what gives them life. That is what makes them
Yes.
excited to get out of bed. And when we're talking about AI and they are taking jobs, you bring up such a good point. Like, why not let it happen? Let's let this
Yeah.
happen so that people can work in the passions and the creativity that actually gives them life. And there's been study after study that when people have a passion or they are using their creativity to create, they are at their happiest. I don't necessarily think that AI is coming to take over the world and take our jobs. And maybe us as humans are so fearful of that change and seeing kind of where it goes. We're holding on too tight. And that also could be fueling that scarcity mindset.
When Amazon gets rid of 500,000 jobs because they're going to be using AI and robots, that those 500,000 people are now going to be poor and starving on the streets, which the way society is working right now is probably true. But it goes back to the fact that we have enough for everyone. And those 500,000 people, they should be taken care of because we have enough to take care of them. So people who are put out of jobs because of technology, we just take care of them. We allow them to live without having to pay to exist. It's going to take a massive shift in our conditioning.
Do you see this as something that will kind of come in and stop gap some of the cycle that's happening because of AI? Or do you see this happening naturally?
I think about it a lot, and I don't think anyone can know. Um, I am so hopeful. I'm so hopeful that humans can get our shit together, but I don't know. I don't know that we're actually going to be able to. We have so much to overcome. We have so much conditioning to overcome, but it starts with the individual, and everyone has the opportunity to change the world. I think people think that one person can't do very much. Even small things change the world. So I like to give the example of just how you behave in the world. So, like, let's say you go to Starbucks and the barista's rude to you because she's having a shitty day, and then you're rude back. And then both of you are having a shitty day now, and you go out into the world and you're rude to somebody else. And that person is now having a shitty day and they're rude to somebody else. And it just continues down the line. So you have to be the kind of person who can break that and be kind. Even if somebody's rude to you, just be kind and maybe try and help them have a better day. If you just break that, you've changed the world.
Mhm.
You have made somebody else's day better. Your day is better. You're going to go out in the world and behave differently and make other people feel better about themselves if you're joyful and kind.
Well said. So well said. And Diana, as I close out the podcast, I wanted to just thank you for writing that book. When I saw your message and I saw what you were all about, it got me to think about these concepts. That's why I was so excited to have you on. It got me going down all these different rabbit holes. I just want to thank you for writing it because it really got my brain going and I really appreciate it.
So thank you so much. That means everything to me. Like that is my biggest hope, that this book just opens people's minds and makes them think in a different way. Yeah. So thank you. I really appreciate that.
It absolutely does. So tell our listeners where they can get the book, where they can learn more about you, if you have a website.
So the major platforms, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, but you can go into your indie bookstore and they can order it for you. My website is dianacolleenauthor.com. And I really want to appeal to book clubs. So if you're in a book club and you decide to read this book, I would be more than happy to come to your meeting via Zoom. Or if you're within 50 miles of Seattle, I'll come in person. But I would love to talk about the book with book clubs in person.
Awesome. Diana, thank you so much for joining us. And thanks for giving us this opportunity to open our minds and think a little bit today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been wonderful.
Thanks for listening to Beyond 80%. Make sure to hit subscribe so you never miss an opportunity to learn, question, and evolve. If you enjoyed this episode, the best way to support the show is to share it with someone in your circle, a friend, a colleague, anyone who's ready to think a little deeper. Until next time, I'm your host, Ryan Ollickson, and this is Beyond 80%.